I will resist the temptation to say we told you so. The 2008-2009 budget communication states that it was crafted against the background of turbulence in the international markets and the uncertain outlook for the Bahamian economy as a result of those events. While this may be true, it is only partially so. For as we said in our initial statement yesterday, and I quote, "We believe that this budget statement confirms what we have said about this government and its performance as it relates to the economy." The budget is a confession of the failure of the FNM's policy over the past 12 months and an admission that the PLP left in place policies to move our country forward. These policies have now been adopted wholesale from the Christie administration's blueprint, shamelessly and without attribution. While there were words of empathy for the poor, the devil will surely be in the details. The poor can find little hope in this budget. There is little in the budget in the way of support for the middle class. There are no details of what will be done to solve crime and aid our national security. We cannot have a budget of words and figures only. This country now requires action for the poor and for the middle class. Let me show the country some instances where our assertions of yesterday are borne out. On the question of the impact of the international economic developments, an examination of the technical report prepared by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and attached as Annex A to the communication would tend to support the view that international developments are to blame. However, the technical report has made some other observations which are worth noting because they speak directly to the way the local economy has been managed over this past year. Economic growth was at a reduced rate. Consumer prices levels are increasing, and there was a sharp contraction in the surplus on the capital account. Further, tourist arrivals were down, although there were indications that visitor expenditure improved. Construction activity was soft. Indeed, mortgage commitments for new construction contracted by 27%. Inflation is up, led by food and gas prices, and unemployment is on the rise. The total national debt rose by 6.2% to over $3 billion, and the ratio of the government's foreign currency debt service to total revenue is 3.8%, as compared with 1.9% in the previous 2 years. All of the important macroeconomic indicators are down. But despite the downturn in the global economy, the Bahamian economy could, in our view, have avoided the deep recession into which we seem to be headed. We could have avoided a deep recession if the government had allowed the contracts and foreign direct investment projects that were in the pipeline to go forward last year. Instead, the ill-advised review and cancel policy adopted by the government when it took office in 2007 removed the cushion that was in place, and we are now feeling the effects of that decision and headed for a recession, just like the rest of the countries in the region. What the government is now attempting to do, and again shamelessly so, is to make up for their blunder, the time that has been lost, and the pain and suffering they have inflicted by introducing a budget that will overcompromise its revenue base. It is seeking, by providing a wide range of tax rollbacks, with the stated view of, and I quote, putting money in the hands of consumers, end quote. We support meaningful tax reductions to citizens, and therefore we are not opposed to those reductions articulated by the Prime Minister, although we believe that the rich should bear proportionately more than the poor. The country must also be sensible, however, and taxpayers and citizens not taken for granted. The government must explain how, given the many tax concessions offered in the 2008-2009 budget and no significant new or increased taxes, we are expected to believe that the revenue will increase by $133 million, or almost 10% over last year, even though the economy is only expected to grow by 2% in real terms. And in this regard, the explanation required may touch upon announcements by the government to sell various assets or part thereof in our country. Because it is important, because the maths on the face of it do not make sense. As regards some of the rollbacks on food items and construction materials in particular, we are constrained to observe that over the years, the customs duty rate on building materials, medicine, and most food items had been sharply reduced, and therefore it is unlikely that the reduction to zero will translate into any significant savings or price reductions at the retail level. Indeed, with rice prices, with the cost of rice increasing and set to rise by June 2008, for example, by 30% for the year, and the price of wheat already doubled what it was just over a year ago, how is the removal of 2% tax on food items a significant savings? And what guarantee does the consumer have that any savings will be passed on to them and not put to the merchant's bottom line? The real numbers are that 2% translates into a savings of just 10 cents on a $5 purchase. The government must say where price control fits into these new measures. The business community here has posted on an international website the story of the delays in obtaining price control approval for the importation of rice from abroad, and the result that this could have on the availability of rice into our country. We still think that price control is a useful mechanism in regulating the supply of goods and services for the poor, but it must be efficiently applied if it is to help the poor. The budget is full of other examples of self-inflicted pain imposed by the F&M that then retracts its position and announces the change as if they have done something grand and revolutionary. Another example is the removal of the customs duties on fuel for BEC, which we support. We should note, however, that it was the F&M government in its first term in office that introduced the change in the first place, or introduced the charge that they are now eliminating in the first place. So I should really repeat that we should note, however, that it was the F&M government in its first term in office that introduced the charge in the first place. I wish now to point to examples of lifting wholesale from the PLP's playbook. The government has adopted the PLP's position on exemptions for first-time homeowners on stamp tax. The government has used sleight of hand to adopt the PLP's approach to assisting the poor and the needy. We also note the description of the Prime Minister when he announced several construction projects. He described them as priming the pump. It remains to be seen whether he can actually mobilize the government's agencies to make any meaningful impact on the economy. But we are again constrained to point out that if he did not stop the straw market project, if he had not, through his intemperate use of language, contributed to Harris jeopardizing the Bahama project, or having the Bahama project jeopardized, we would not now be in need of any priming of the pump. This is yet another example of self-inflicted pain by the F&M, who then stepped back from their ruinous position and then with flourish announced the warmed-up pea soup as some new initiative.